Stop Hurting My Child by Simon Lee Price. Everyone told her it was pointless going to see them, and it would probably just make things worse. But she had to try something, and so set off with her sick daughter early one morning on the long journey south. The train was packed and traveled so slowly there were moments when she thought they might never reach the new capital. Her daughter was irritable and complained all the way. She wanted Daddy. She wanted to go home. You couldn't always see she was in pain. Sometimes you could convince yourself it had gone away or that it was a small thing and easily borne. Everyone had the pain and everyone learned how to tolerate it. But this was her daughter. No matter how hard she tried, no matter what they said, she could not accept this same life for her. The place she was going was not shown on the street map. They never made it easy for you, even though they kept saying they'd come as friends and liberators. She had to lead and finally carry her poor daughter halfway across the city, a city as vast as it was old, before she found the building with the statue outside. They went up the flights of concrete steps and in through a glass entranceway big enough for a giant. Nobody paid them any attention, although she and her daughter wore clothes that set them apart from everybody else, and it must have been obvious from their anxious faces that they were strangers here and needed help. She approached a tall counter and waited until the woman stationed behind it finally glanced away from the computer screen. Now was the moment. She braced herself and repeated the words she'd practiced so many times in front of the mirror. I would like to speak to somebody about the pain. About the pain? Yes, my daughter's pain. The woman peered down over the edge of the counter. Is that your daughter? Yes, her name is Mary. Why did you bring her here? I thought... She stopped and began again. Someone said... There's absolutely nobody here who can help you. She felt her daughter tugging on her arm, but stayed resolute. I've traveled all day to get here, and I won't go until I speak to somebody. The woman scowled and picked up her phone. Security, she said, but a man who was walking by motioned with his hand, and she put the phone down again. Might I be of assistance? The man came closer, smiling. He had a dark, trimmed beard and reminded her a little of her father. She turned on him in a sudden rage. You can throw me out 1,000 times, but I'll keep coming back until somebody speaks to me. He hardly reacted, and his voice stayed calm. It would be undignified for all concerned if we descended into such a farce. I take you to be an intelligent woman, and I'm sure you are a good mother and only want the best for your daughter. I can reschedule one of my meetings and accommodate your request. He insisted they refresh themselves before he answered any questions and had an assistant fetch drinks, sandwiches, and crisps, which they were allowed to consume sitting in comfortable chairs in front of his desk. When they'd had their fill, he put the empty packaging and bottles inside a plastic bag, tied it up, and deposited it in the waste bin. Then he leant back in his chair at the other side of the desk and gave them his full attention. She seems a happy child, he said. She tries to be happy despite the pain. What other choice does she have? There are many children who suffer far worse. I know that. Even my own children had to take the pain pill for a while. But what good does the pain do them? What good does it do anybody? There's something good in everything. I'm going to make it stop. I swear, I will. Mrs. Summers, you know you won't do that. Your child will be taken from you immediately if you try. She was silent. Remember, we didn't bring the pain among you. The pain was here before we came. There was never a time without the pain. But you promised to free us. We administer the pain much more humanely than before. We outlawed the great exhibitions, and we introduced the monthly lottery for the exemptions." He spoke to her daughter directly, adopting a cheerful tone. "How are you feeling?" "Okay." "Are you in pain?" She shook her head quickly and stared down at her bare knees, pressing them together. "You see?" he said, turning back to the mother. "Your child is much tougher than you imagine. She's already learning to live with the pain." "No, she is not. Look at her face. She's hurting all over. She just won't admit it. She wants to be brave. For me." "What's her prescription?" "She gets the injection once a week at school. The normal dosage for a girl her age." "Now, that's not so very bad, is it? She'll feel like all the rest of her friends." "I just want you to stop hurting her." Her appeal seemed to pass by his ears unheard. In some regions, this feeling is not even called the pain. They regard it as a natural occurrence, an intrinsic part of a person's constitution. The pain makes you who you are. But it isn't natural. You give us the pain. You started hurting my daughter even before she was born. Her daughter had begun to cry, silently. He reached his handkerchief across to her. "You're upsetting your child, Mrs. Summers. I want you to stop making her sick." "Suppose we did. Supposing we made an exception in the case of your daughter. What would we say to the millions of other mothers who would demand we do the same for their sons and daughters?" "You could stop it for them, too. Stop it for everybody. But first, the children." "This is a dream, Mrs. Summers. Such a thing will never happen." "Nobody can tell me why we have to suffer the pain." He sat forward with his elbows resting on his desk and pressed his fingertips together. He tapped them against his bearded chin, thinking, and then he spoke. "Mrs. Summers, you are asking me a question that really has no answer. Or, rather, it has a very simple answer, one that you must have been given countless times, yet still do not fully understand. That's just the way things are." He sighed. "I have tried to encourage you to view your daughter's situation in a more positive light, but I can see that I've failed. I should hardly be surprised, I suppose. My job seldom requires me to communicate with the general public, and I'm not trained in the art of persuasion. You are not even in the right part of the city to get the kind of answers I think you are seeking. This building belongs to the Department for the Other World, and I am a humble engineer. Still, I can respect you have traveled a long way to get here, and I believe that sincere effort should be rewarded. You deserve at least a return home with a sense that your long journey was not a complete waste of time." He pressed on the intercom and summoned his assistant. "I will show you something, Mrs. Summers, that very few people ever get to see. But the place I am taking you is not suitable for a child." "I will not leave her," she said, grabbing her daughter's hand. "She comes with me wherever I go." "She will be well looked after, I assure you." "I don't trust you." "Mrs. Summers, what do you take me for? A monster? I have no intention of abducting your child." The assistant appeared, bearing sweets and toys and smiling. Mary tugged her hand free and sprung out of the chair, the happiest she'd been the whole long day. "You will see your daughter again very soon," he said. "I give you my word." She followed him through a door at the back of his office and down a long, windowless corridor. The throb of grinding machinery came from behind the walls. He led her to a pair of steel doors at the very end and entered his code. "Prepare yourself, Mrs. Summers. There are many things worse than death. Even things worse than the pain, especially in the relatively small and controlled doses you are used to experiencing it." She and her daughter got back to the station just in time to board the last train. They dropped into their seats and sat in silence as they were carried away from the city. She looked at the faces of the other passengers, Working people, tough people, her kind. She had learned to live with the pain. They all had. So would her daughter. There were always places you could go to get help, where they listened to you with sincere expressions, nodding their heads, all kinds of ways you could take your mind off the pain. In that other world, behind the gray doors, you couldn't even cry. Your nose and your mouth did not belong to you. They were fastened inside a mask with a vacuum tube attached to the front, and you went on all fours through the uncut grass, head lowered, sucking and sucking and sucking. It made her giddy to recall those scattered bands of vacuum people. They had been forced into grotesque suits of body armor fixed together from baking trays, chopping boards, pan lids, and other items of household junk that they dragged themselves forward like beetle samurai, some of them towing chains and bells from their ankles, all of them swinging their plastic trunks from side to side. Not cleaning, he told her, but the spectacle of cleaning. It never stopped, just changed its form according to the dictates of the spectators who sat on towering stools, wearing long robes and silver wigs. He'd shown her his current project. It was a tiny harness and bit, too small for even the smallest pony. There were stirrups and a saddle to go with it, and 4 shiny pink shoes which resembled pig's trotters, just big enough for a child's hands and feet to squeeze inside. He gave her a rusty tin can to hold. Elastic bands were threaded through the rim of the open end. "The snout," he said. She stared at the pair of jagged nostrils punched into the bottom. "Why?" she asked, and it felt as if a stone had been pushed down her throat. The sky rolled toward her. "Just tell me why." He caught her as she swayed and kept her on her feet. "They want horses. Not real horses, of course, but toy horses. Hobby horses, pantomime horses, and merry-go-round horses. They fill stables and fields with gaudily painted men, women, and children who have no other life than to lie across the narrow wooden beams with embroidered cushions strapped to their backs. You are required to keep your arms and legs positioned as if you were running at a full gallop, and be ready to neigh or whinny on command." He took the can from her lifeless fingers and put it back in the box with the other items. "There is not even dying here, Mrs. Summers. Only aging and performance." Her daughter had already fallen asleep, and she stroked the small head which had found temporary relief in the crook of her arm. There were things worse than the pain. Things even more senseless. She stared out through the window at the distant lights racing past in the darkness. Tomorrow was the lottery, and next month there would be another. She shut her eyes and let herself dream that one day, yes, one day soon, her sick child would win an exemption. Simon Lee Pierce lives and writes in the UK. His short stories appear in Prowl, Interpreter's House, Siren's Call, and in an anthology of speculative fiction titled Restless by Frith Books. He has forthcoming publications in Dakuna Fiction and 5-to-1 magazine. The music in this episode is by Sealand. You can find more of their work, including their album Dark Days, at SEALAND at bandcamp.com.